What?
With the crew.
Don't start with last name.
Everybody here?
Yeah.
Yo, Chris and Mason.
What's up?
I want to go
Work.
over.
What?
What?
Not bad.
No, I use. The door open?
Do you want it open?
You want it.
Doesn't
I mean,
Pass it
Yeah, I would turn off half the lights.
can we lock?
Yeah, turn off one of the lights.
I could use some.
I know, I thought it
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, a little bit. Do the other one first.
Turn off.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let me know when.
Yeah, that's fine.
Want to do this one?
Just click that, it's like the same thing.
You ready?
There we go.
Alright, what's up everybody? Happy Halloween. As your mom. We're the crew. My name's Cody. Don is Brian. Chris.
I'm Mason.
And we're presenting the battle between smartphones and iPods and how it will turn out in 5 years. I did the history of smartphones and iPods. Alright, and I will show you just how useful these are. 'Cause I'm pretty sure everybody has one of these. I have my notes on here, so I don't have a note cartridge in my phone. That's one use right there. So I want you to think back to a time that you first bought your smartphone or an iPod. Was it pretty recent or no? Did you ever have a CD player? Anyone have a CD player? All right, cool. I never had one. I was poor. But if you had to pick between a smartphone and an iPod, which one would you choose? That's what we thought too. It's probably because it's most convenient, right? We can pretty much do the same thing, so make calls on this one. So anyway, we're going to compare the usefulness of both throughout our whole project. The first thing we came up with was the concept of music players that existed way back when, which were obviously before smartphones. And they expanded everywhere from CD players to the MP3s, then eventually iPods. You can play games on iPods now, which you never could do really before, and there's even like GPS and all kind of cool stuff like that. It wasn't until really recently that there was actually smartphones, like maybe 10 or so years ago. We'll go into that. They might have been revolutionary, but they weren't always the all-purpose tool that we use and see today. Like in my hand, I can do whatever I want with this pretty much. First smartphone ever was called IBM Simon and had very limited uses, but it did still have a touch screen, which is pretty cool for that time. It was referred to as the brick, which is kind of now used to describe any real crappy phone that you can get. There was also Palm, Nokia, and BlackBerry that came out with different kinds of smartphones afterwards, after the Simon. And even more recently, in 2007, the Android and iPhones both came out. And all their following generations, like the 5, 4, they're still viable today. Then afterwards, in like 2009, 2010, Motorola and then HTC came out as well. All the newer products featured more memory space, more customizability, and like just all kind of features and performance. And for a more in-depth look at the history of smartphones, we got a link I put down there, and that's the Simon right there, by the way. I put a link down here, and it's a brief history of smartphones. It's pretty cool, and it's like interactive. So for more clarification on this history and specifics of iPods and stuff, Chris has a video that I'm not sure if we're going to show. You want to show it? Might take too much time.
Yeah, I guess
Show
not
parts of it.
Yeah, we show parts of it. Alright, so there's a video. Everyone remembers like the first iPod that they got. iPods came out back in like 2001. When they first came out, they were only compatible for Mac, so Windows users weren't able to use them. That was a big thing when they came out. But I think later that year, early 2002, they came out with an iPod that was compatible for Mac. And then basically ever since that, they've just been rapidly coming out, probably every 6 months to a year, I would say. So this video is pretty cool. It gives you like a background on all the iPods that ever came out from the first one. It only goes up to 2009, probably around the time where the first iPod Touch came out. But I'll show you the video, it's pretty cool. And you'll notice throughout the video that how it kind of ties in with the class, how the prices just basically either stay the same or go down when new products come out. Because they're producing so many iPods because they're so in demand this day and age that they basically can charge a lower price and still make quota or profit. So here's the video. It's kind of cool. And you can see, like, as it goes on, the amount of songs that it can hold and it's not, the price is still going down. They add so many more capabilities. And basically, this was the first color iPod. That's why it was so expensive. But as you can see, like as it goes throughout time, the price just goes down because they sell so many of these iPods that they don't even charge a higher price to buy it. I just found it quite interesting. I just found the video from there just for time purposes. But it goes on to talk. It goes on to show the iPod Touch and then a little bit of the evolution of the iPod Touch. It only goes up to I think 2010, so they're obviously missing a bunch of generations of the iPods. But I just thought that was pretty cool the way they depicted that. And then the evolution of the smartphone, like Cody said, well, it all started back in 1974 when a group of scientists, they created a patent for for an apparatus that generates and transmits digital information. So they basically created the idea for the smartphone. They didn't have the technology back then to actually create a smartphone, but they just came up with the idea. And then in 1994, they created the BRIC, which is the Simon Personal Communicator. They combined the PDA and the cell phone. Both of those have been out since probably like the 80s. They were just never combined into an actual smartphone before. And then in 2000, Ericsson, which is actually an Android company, they created the term smartphone and actually used it in the marketplace. to actually market their products. And throughout the next probably 4 to 7 years, companies started coming out with new phones like the Trio Palm Pilot, the Nokia, all those phones, they started coming out. But no phone actually hit the market as hard as the actual iPhone. And I think, I have this opinion, I think that they knew what they were doing the whole time with the iPhone, because if they came out, I feel like they came out with the iPod in 2001 just to get people acclimated to the whole, I guess, kind of Apple scene really, with the whole music, and they just basically combined it with a phone. If you guys want to check out our blog, I'm not going to show the video, but the video up there is actually the unveiling of the iPhone, like the first, I guess you could say, presentation when Steve Jobs unveiled it to the world. It's actually pretty cool. I was only going to watch like the first like 20 minutes of it, but I wound up watching the whole like hour and a half. So if you guys want to do that, check it out. And then basically after 2007, like right after 2007, a lot of companies just started putting out stuff to compete with the iPhone. And I mean, even though today Android is the top selling mobile platform around the world, it just, I mean, it's kind of in debate who is actually on top in the cell phone market today. So I mean, you guys can decide that for yourselves really. But next up, we have Nak Dondi talking about the present scenario in the cell phone market today.
I'm gonna give a brief description on smartphones and iPods in today's society. The smartphone, the present scenario for the smartphone and the iPod today, there's many varieties of both. For smartphone example, we have Galaxies, Androids, iPhones, etc. For the iPod, although there are many types, there's only really one that can compare to a smartphone. That's the iPod that Apple makes, and the reason being because you can download apps, take pictures, like Cody was saying, pretty much everything a phone can do, besides make calls, which is still an important use in today's society. The race to extinction for one of these devices is still very close. Although the smartphone is winning, with that being said, and the iPhone being the most popular, although we said the Galaxy, we said the Android, is the most, people buy it the most. The iPhone is still the most popular. With the new one being released every year, we think here in the near future that the smartphone will erase the iPod and still remain as the present person's best friend. That description, there's Brian with properties of the phone.
Take one of these and pass it around.
My video. Hi, Reese.
Alright. What I just handed you was like just some photos of the iPhone 5 and the iPod 5th generation. And there's some cool facts on there I want to talk about. And the first photo is the dimensions. The iPod Touch is much smaller than the iPhone 5. Not the iPod Touch, the iPod this generation is much smaller and thinner than the iPhone 5. And what else? The iPod Touch 5th generation is much lighter than the iPhone 5. And, display. Display, the iPhone 5 has a bigger screen. No, I think they will. Nah, the iPhone 5 has a bigger screen than the iPod 5th generation. The processor. The iPhone 5 has an A6 Apple card or processor card, and the iPod Touch has a A5 And the the iPhone chip is much better because it works better. It helps the phone move way much faster. And the RAM for the iPhone 5 is 1 gigabyte. And the RAM for the iPod Touch is 512 megabytes. And with the iPhone 5 having more RAM, it means they can run more apps at one time. Next page. I'm gonna talk about the storage. The storages for both of these phones are pretty much the same. It's just the iPhone 5 comes with 16 gigabytes. And wireless, this is pretty much the biggest difference between both of the devices. The iPod Touch still doesn't have Wi-Fi, like you can't use your cellular data. And the battery, I couldn't find anything for the battery, but I did research some stuff, and they said that they wouldn't know until they both were shipped out, something like that. The cameras, the iPhone 5 has a 8 megapixel camera, and the iPod 5th generation only had a 5 megapixel. So that means the iPhone 5 works pretty good. I'm gonna give it the knock for the future.
We also have a video here of like just a recent comparison between iPhone and iPods that just kind of basically reiterates exactly what he was talking about. You should check that out too, it's pretty cool.
Alright, so the possibility of future competition. Even though smartphones and iPods are battling it out, neither devices are safe from the iPad mini, because it is essentially like a smartphone, but it's like bigger. So you can play games on it easier, and this infographic right here says that like most tablet usage is dedicated to gaming, and that makes sense because like the iPad is bigger than a smartphone, so you can game easier and you won't make mistakes like touching, accidentally hitting something else. Smartphone companies like Samsung has already designed smartphones that's bigger than usual, while Apple iPhones are still relatively smaller than their competition. That's why like Samsung is really successful in like other countries or even the US sometimes, because most of their phones are bigger. The iPod is still the same size. They're not really competing at all. And this graph here shows the sales comparison between the iPhone, iPod, and iPad. So iPhone and iPads are increasing in sales while the iPod is just deteriorating. So the iPod isn't really catching up at all, but the iPhone will remain in the market for quite a while, and the iPad is a rising competitor. And here's Mason with conclusion.
Alright, so basically everything we've said. Clearly the smartphone is going to be the winner in 5 years. It's more just for personal preference. It's so much easier and more convenient than the iPod, basically because the iPod, like Brian said, doesn't have the cellular data. So you need Wi-Fi hookup, even though Wi-Fi is everywhere. You know, they might be similar, but that's the one thing that's going to kill the iPod. However, there's some facts in here. I won't go into all of them, but over the last year, the iPods sold 2 billion units less. That's almost 25%. It's really close. And that's substantial. That's a lot. In 1 year, to drop a quarter of your sales is pretty drastic. And there was a study done in Europe by a company called Mintel, and they found that through some research that iPods and MP3s as a whole, we keep referring to iPods just because they're the face of the MP3. However, MP3s as a whole, sales have dropped to around 23 million euros. So that's not close to where they have been in the past. There's a lot more studies in Europe that I found versus the United States. I'm not sure why that is. However, in Germany, they did another study where they found by 2015, 95+% of the population is all going to be owners of smartphones, which is huge. I tried to find the percent of the United States, however, I think some European countries are more wealthy than we have. A lot of poverty-stricken areas, so they can't afford the smartphones. So that's why more people in Europe will have the smartphones in 2 or 3 years. But the argument that's most valid is the price for what you're getting. The iPod and the iPhone are not hugely different in price. So for a little bit more, you get something that does it all versus the iPod that can't quite do everything. It's just a little bit shy of all the marks that the iPhone has set. So that's just a big factor. However, some people argue that the sound quality might not be as good on the iPhone because, I don't know, whatever reason. But in the future, they're just going to advance. They come out with a new phone every year, so they're going to up the ante every year they come out with something. I'm sure you all remember your first camera phones and how horrible the picture quality was. We could have done a presentation on how the iPhone and smartphones are going to shut down GPSs, MP3s, cameras, all that. But we just basically went with the iPod itself, their own product, but I think they knew what they were doing when they created it, like Chris said. So yeah, the winner's going to be a smartphone.
And so with all the information that you've seen, we pretty much really like to see our prediction come to life in 5 years. But for now, the go-to device to actually compare every project just like this to is actually the Apple iPod or iPhone 5. So that just goes to show that we're probably right. That's it.